My name is Thaís, and for a long time, I was ashamed to admit that I was manipulated, not because I did anything wrong, but because I have always considered myself a strong, independent woman, full of opinion, those who swear that they would never fall into this type of relationship. That's that. I was exactly that woman, until I met Gustavo. It was November, almost the end of the year, and I was going through a strange phase in life. I felt out of place at work, away from my family, and I had just come out of a dull relationship, which lasted longer than it should have. I was emotionally tired, that feeling of being lost within one's own routine. It was in this scenario that Gustavo appeared. We met in a bookstore, almost cliché, I know. He was sitting reading a psychology book and made a comment about the title I was holding. We started talking right there, between shelves. He was articulate, charismatic, seemed so intelligent and sensitive at the same time. You know that guy who looks you in the eye with genuine attention? That he listens without interrupting? Who seems to know exactly what to say? In less than 20 minutes of conversation, I was laughing, opening up, talking about things that normally took me weeks to tell someone. He had that calm air, a low and confident voice, which conveyed confidence. Before we left, he asked me for the number and said, "I want to continue this conversation. With wine, perhaps." The next day, he texted early. It wasn't those generic messages. It was as if he remembered everything I had said. It made me feel important, almost seen. We scheduled to go out on Saturday, and the first meeting was magical. The conversation flowed. He seemed amazed by every single thing I told about myself. And when he talked about his mother who had died early, his childhood traumas and his love disappointments, I thought, wow, what a sensitive, open, real man. It didn't take long for us to start seeing each other almost every day. In a matter of 2 weeks, he was already calling me my wife. It was all intense, fast, but I liked it. For the first time in a long time, I felt that someone was really invested in me, that there were no games, no insecurities. And it was hard not to be enchanted by the way he complimented me. He said things like, "I've never met anyone like you, Thaís. You're rare, And I believed it. My friends started commenting that everything was going too fast, that maybe it would be good to take it easy. But I always answered, when it's meant to be, we feel it. And I felt it, or I thought I did. With just over a month together, he asked me to date. It was a night all put together by him, with flowers, dinner, and even a playlist with songs we had heard on the first outings. I, who have always been suspicious, melted. He said yes. I said with an open heart, thinking I had finally found someone who valued who I was. The first strange signs appeared shortly after, and like many, I didn't notice. It all started with small comments. One day he said that my best friend Camila was too invasive, and that he didn't like the way she advised me. I defended it, of course, but he insisted that it was just an impression, that maybe I wasn't seeing what he saw from the outside. At another point, he said that a coworker was in love with me, and that he thought it was a little disrespectful to me. Another time, he complained about the clothes I wore to go to company events, saying that they drew too much attention. But he said these things in a sweet, calm, almost worried tone. He was not aggressive. It was as if I was protecting myself from the world, and I started to wonder, is he right? Gradually, without realizing it, I changed. I started to avoid Camila, to respond less in groups, to refuse invitations to go out. I started asking him what he thought of my clothes, my lines. I found myself wondering if I wasn't really exaggerating in friendships, contacts, my exposure. It was all subtle and silent. There were no screams, no fights, but there were many small renunciations. Too small to look dangerous, until all added together they formed a prison. To the outside eye, everything seemed perfect. The photos on Instagram showed dinners, short trips, smiles and holding hands. Everyone commented, "You make a beautiful couple. Gustavo seems to do you so well." I smiled, thanked, and inside, I felt that something was different, but I didn't know exactly what. Gradually, my life began to revolve exclusively around him. He was my first good morning, my last good night, my reference for everything. If I thought about doing something alone, he would ask, "Why without me?" If I mentioned a lunch with friends, he reacted with an eerie silence, a tone of bitter playfulness. "Oh, are you going to leave me today?" I began to avoid conflicts, filtering words. to choose the path of least resistance. And he did. And he liked it. I remember one time when I went to visit my parents alone. I just spent the weekend. It was a visit arranged months ago. On Sunday afternoon, while I was talking to my mother, my cell phone began to vibrate. He had sent 16 messages, most of them with that passive-aggressive tone. "You're gone. I think I was wrong to trust that this weekend was going to be smooth. When you're with me, I give you my full time. Think about it." I returned home feeling guilty, as if he had done something wrong. And when I arrived, he didn't fight. He didn't complain. It was just cold, far, and it hurt more than if he had screamed. He knew that. He knew exactly where to move. Then he came with flowers, with apologies. He said he missed it, that he didn't know how to deal with distance because he loved it too much. And I accepted, because it was easier to accept and have the affectionate Gustavo back than to face the cold Gustavo, who made me feel like everything was my fault. Over time, I began to refuse my mother's invitations, answering fewer messages from old friends. It felt like I was choosing love, that he was prioritizing the relationship. But deep down, I was no longer choosing anything. I was adapting, molding myself, withdrawing. 3 months after we started dating, he suggested that I quit my job. He said that he saw me as too exhausted, that my boss did not value me, that I had the potential for more. "You could invest in your own business, or even do something with what you love," he would say. At first, I thought it was beautiful, a man who encouraged me to dream. But with each conversation, I realized that he wanted me to leave quickly. "Do it for us. You'll have more time for us. I can hold the bills for a while," he said firmly. I was reluctant, and he started to change again. He was distant, sarcastic. I made jokes about my work routine. "Are you going to live trapped in a system that sucks you to the bone?" And I, tired and emotionally fragile, ended up resigning. In the first days, it was even liberating. He looked proud. He said that now we would have real time together. But it only took 2 weeks for me to realize that what I thought was freedom, it was control. He started to give his opinion on everything I did. Time I woke up, time on my cell phone, what I ate, even the tone with which I answered messages. It was as if I had become an extension of him. And every time I disagreed or was uncomfortable, he turned the tables. He said I was ungrateful, that he did everything for me, that I only wanted my good. "Don't you see how much I sacrifice?" he would say, with that martyr's face. I started to apologize for everything, because she was tired, for wanting to be alone, for wanting to leave, because it exists outside of it. It was at this point that my health began to fail. I had frequent migraine attacks, insomnia, hair loss. And yet, when I thought about talking about all this with someone, something inside me said, "But he's good. He's here. He never beat you. He loves you." To conquer, he deceives with beautiful words, and to conquer, and then he shows his claws. That was the thought that kept me, and that held me. Only years later did I understand that love is not only made of the absence of violence, that sometimes the cruelest prison is the one that has no visible bars. What hurts me the most when I remember this phase is that I didn't know I was in prison. From the outside, it's easy to think, "Why didn't you leave?" But inside, everything was gray, confusing, foggy. Gustavo wasn't cruel all the time. On the contrary, on the good days, the ones he strategically chose, he made me feel like the most special woman in the world. He took me to dinner, prepared breakfast, talked about travel plans, children, the future. And it was in those moments that I clung to, as if they were proof that the problem was not him. It was me. That if I were just more patient, more understanding, more dedicated, everything would go back to the way it was in the beginning. These cycles kept me in a constant state of anxiety. I never knew which version of Gustavo was going to appear, which was going to activate his distancing, which word or silence of mine would trigger his coldness. And when he walked away, it was as if my identity evaporated with it. I started to live to please, to avoid conflict, of guessing his thoughts before he spoke. It sucked me in. It took me out of myself. I think the most symbolic moment of this loss of identity happened on a Sunday afternoon. We were at his mother's house, and she commented on a trip I had taken years before, alone. I excitedly told him about the script, the experiences, the places I visited. When we got home, he was silent in the car the whole way. When he arrived, he closed the door and said, Do you hear yourself? It seems that he is proud to have lived things away from me. Do you think that's beautiful? Going out into the world with no one? I was paralyzed. I didn't understand. I hadn't said anything too much, but I realized that it bothered him, and I kept silent. I kept quiet because it was safer that way, and that was the last straw that I didn't realize was a drop. I just swallowed it. That night, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, where did I end up? When did I stop feeling alive? The following week, he suggested that we deactivate our social networks. He said he wanted something more intimate, more true. People get too involved, Thaís. I don't want our love exposed to the envy of others. At the time, I even thought it was romantic, but it was just another step in isolation. Over time, even my thoughts began to be shaped by him. When I read a book, I thought, will he like it if I talk about it to him? When I wanted to listen to a song, I asked myself, will he think this is silly? I stopped being me, and yet, every day I woke up trying to be better, more understanding, more serene, more like the woman he wanted by his side. But this woman was never enough. He always found some fault. There was always a new reason to make me feel guilty. One night, returning from a dinner that didn't take place, because he canceled at the last minute saying he was exhausted from my drama, I stopped in the elevator mirror and stared at myself. I was pale, my eyes sunken, my hair tied up anyway, and a blouse that I didn't like, but that he had said made me more discreet. There, in that image, I saw someone who looked like me, but it wasn't me. And it was on that day that something began to break. I started writing, in secret, small notes about what I felt, what he said, how I reacted, as if I needed to prove to myself that this was happening, as if he needed testimony, since everything seemed so subtle, so indefinable. And the more I wrote, the more it cleared, and the more it cleared, the more it hurt. But it was in this process that I began, slowly, to come back to myself. Starting to write was like lighting a candle inside a dark room. The light was still small, it flickered, but it showed enough for me to realize that that place where I lived, it was not safe. And more than that, it wasn't mine. I started to hide the notebooks as if they were weapons. I hid it in the back of the closet, in the middle of old clothes, afraid that he would find it and say that I was paranoid, because he said it often. Whenever I brought up something that bothered me, he laughed, put his hand on my face as if I were a stubborn child and said, "You see something, Thaís. You are like this, too sensitive." It was this phrase, too sensitive, that he used to dismantle any truth I tried to express. And for a long time it worked, until, with the words on paper, I began to see a pattern. Repetitions, manipulations, cycles. I began to remember situations that I had buried. Like that time he accused me of flirting with the waiter, just because I smiled back at the polite, "Good night." Or when he made me return from a trip from my sister's house 2 days ahead of schedule, saying that he was sick and feeling abandoned. He used affection as bait and silence as punishment. When I did something that I didn't like, he didn't scream. He didn't fight. He disappeared emotionally. I would go days without touching myself, without smiling, without looking into my eyes. And when I asked him what was going on, he replied, "Nothing. It's you who's weird." And I believed it, because his silence was deafening. It made me beg for crumbs of attention. It was on a rainy afternoon that the penny really started to drop. I was alone at home, sitting on the couch with the notebook on my lap, and I reread everything I had written in the last 2 months. Reports of humiliation disguised as advice, cutting phrases disguised as concerns, a constant dismantling of my self-esteem. I closed the notebook with trembling hands, and a question echoed inside me. If I saw a friend living this, what would I say to her? The answer came right away. Get out. For God's sake, get out. But when it was me, I hesitated. I then started to do something that seemed banal, but that changed everything. I went back to walking alone. Short walks. At first I told him I was going to the bakery. Then, I started not to warn. It was my little act of resistance. Breathe free air, to observe the world without him by my side. Or rather, without him in control. On these walks I began to think more clearly, to remind me of who I was before him. Of Thaís who traveled alone, who danced in the middle of the room, who spent hours talking to friends, who dreamed big, and every memory hurt, because it seemed distant, but at the same time, it ignited something inside me. I started answering more messages from Camilla. I went back to following my sister on the networks. I started consuming content about abusive relationships, in secret, and that's when the word narcissist first appeared. At first I refused. I found it heavy. I thought it was exaggerated. But the videos, the reports, the patterns, everyone was beating. It was like listening to my own story being told by other voices. Strong, intelligent women who were also destroyed little by little. One night, I watched a video that talked about gaslighting. I cried alone in the bathroom because it all made sense. The doubts he sowed, the certainties he wrested, the way it made me look crazy, unstable, confused, while he maintained the pose of balance and rationality. And there, for the first time, I stopped feeling guilty. I began to plan my departure in silence. I organized documents, made professional contacts again, searched for rooms to rent, all in a discreet way, as if he were plotting an escape. And, in a way, it was. But he began to notice. Narcissists sense when they are losing control. He became sweeter, more present. She started planning trips, talking about marriage, children. I said I was thinking of buying an apartment in my name, and I almost gave in, because that's how they do it. They destroy you, then they offer you the cure that only exists if you continue to be sick next to them. But this time, I didn't go. The decision not to give in was both silent and brutal, because I didn't scream, I didn't argue, I didn't declare myself. Only, I started to move away inside, and perhaps this was the most revolutionary gesture I have ever made in my life. I continued to live there for a few more days, but I no longer reacted to the manipulations. It didn't justify me so much. He no longer apologized for existing, and he felt it. He felt like someone who feels the ground shake under his feet. Because, until then, I always reacted. He explained it to me. He was trying to prove that he was doing everything right. But now, I watched in silence, and he hated it. One night, he came home from work and found me reading. She asked why I was so silent. He said he was feeling a strange atmosphere between us. And when I said I was just tired, he kept looking at me like he couldn't believe it. "Aren't you hiding something from me, Thaís?" I took a deep breath and calmly replied, "No, I'm just listening to myself more." His look changed right away. It was as if he had realized that he had lost the only weapon that worked for me, emotional control. That night, he did not sleep at home. He said he was going to cool down. I didn't ask where I was going. I didn't care. I didn't cry. And it baffled him more than any scene I could do. The next morning, he came back sweeter than ever. I brought coffee in bed. He hugged me tightly. She said she loved me, that she knew it was being difficult, and that she wanted to go to couples therapy. He even talked about seeking professional help to deal with his own traumas, and I wanted to believe it. For a few seconds I wanted to, because there was still inside me that woman who fell in love with him in the bookstore, the one who believed in the promises, the looks, the beautiful words. But this woman was dying, and I knew that if I didn't leave soon, she would disappear for good. That same week, I packed my things while he was away. I had to pretend that everything was normal until the last second. And when I closed the suitcase, my hands trembled. They were shaking so much that I could hardly turn the key to the door. But I went. I went with fear, in pain, with guilt. But I went. I went to my sister's house. I didn't tell you all the details right away. I just said I needed a break. She welcomed me without question. He looked at me with that look that only those who really know you have. And there, on that first night away from him, I slept without medicine, for the first time in months. But of course, he didn't leave it cheap. The messages began the next day, long, full of emotion. He said that I was the love of his life, that he didn't understand why I had done that he was lost. Then came the anger. He called me ungrateful, crazy. He said I destroyed a beautiful relationship. And finally, came the final manipulation. Silence. He disappeared for days, and when he reappeared, he sent me a single sentence. "I just hope you don't regret it." That phrase kept echoing inside me, because part of me, I was still afraid of regretting it, of having done something wrong, of exaggerating. It was at that moment that I almost came back. I almost answered. I almost agreed to meet. I almost threw away all the courage that took me months to gather. Because the emotional addiction was still there, because the cycle of abuse had not yet been broken within me, and I cried, very much, lying on the mattress borrowed from my niece with the hallway light on. I cried because I missed it. I cried because I blamed myself. I cried because I was rebuilding, and that hurt more than the destruction itself. But I didn't answer. I closed the phone, and I did. I wrote down everything he had made me feel, everything I stopped being, everything I lost. I wrote for hours, until my hands hurt. And there, in that text, in that intimate confession to myself, I found something he had been trying to wrest from me from the beginning: my voice. That night, I heard myself for the first time in a long time, and the woman who spoke to me in there was strong, much more than I imagined. From the moment I found my voice, it was no longer possible to silence it. I was still crying. I still missed it. I still had dreams about him, those dreams that mix affection and anguish, as if my subconscious was trying to confuse me. But something inside me had changed, and once it changes, it is no longer the same as before. I began to study more deeply about emotional abuse, narcissism, trauma. I read reports from other women. I watched videos, went to therapy, connected with support pages, and for the first time, I understood that what I experienced was not just a difficult relationship. It was a cycle of slow, painstaking, calculated destruction. Gustavo didn't hit me. He never screamed, but he killed whole parts of my soul, took me away from who I was, made me doubt my sanity. This is also abuse, but disguised, camouflaged as love. This kind of man doesn't come with punches. He comes with sweet words, with excessive compliments, with gifts. And when he realizes that you're involved, he begins to mold you, to dismantle you. First, in the name of love. Then, in the name of its supposed instability. And in the end, you no longer know what is true. It took months for me to stop justifying myself for everything, so that I can choose again what to wear, what to listen to, what to say without asking myself, what would he think of this? It took a long time for me to leave without feeling afraid. Fear of being judged, of provoking someone, of being misunderstood. Fear that he planted and watered inside me with small phrases that seemed to be worries, but they were invisible fences. One day, I received a message from him. Short, cold. It said, "I hope you're happy now." I read it, and I didn't feel angry. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I felt sorry, because he's never going to really love anyone, because he doesn't know what that is, because love, for him, is just a way of possessing. And what he lost in me was not a submissive woman. It was a whole woman, free. Hooray. Today, I went back to work. I went out with friends again. I went back to dancing in the middle of the room alone, with the loud music, and without worrying about whether anyone would find it childish. I'm not saying that everything has become a fairy tale. I still have bad days. I still have anxiety attacks. I still look back sometimes with pain. But now, this pain does not define me. She teaches me. I'm not the woman he tried to destroy. I am the woman who survived him. And if you're listening to that, and you recognize yourself, if she feels that she is being controlled, manipulated, diminished, listen to your intuition. That little voice he tries to silence is the same one that will get you out of there. You're not exaggerating. You're not crazy. And most of all, you're not alone. You are worthy of a love that does not confuse, that does not make you sick, that does not extinguish your light. And this love, it starts with yourself.